Dr. Jeffrey Spillane. Dr. Spillane is a thoracic and general surgeon with Cape Cod Healthcare, and he practices at Southeastern Surgical Associates in Hyannis. He attended New York Medical College in Valhalla, New York, completed his residency and fellowship in general thoracic surgery at the U.S. Air Force Medical Center, Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. He has been affiliated with Cape Cod Healthcare since 2004 and is certified by the American Board of Surgery and Surgical Critical Care. Today, Dr. Spillane will discuss Juul, e-cigarettes, and the rising teenage vaping epidemic, what today's parents need to know. A very important topic, timely topic for Cape Cod, I think. So without further ado, Dr. Spillane.
Thanks. Thank you. Dr. Siddhartha really needs to be congratulated for bringing this whole philosophy of wellness and a focus on wellness out into the forefront, because speaking as one of the physicians here, we always focus on disease, but the converse of that is wellness, and I really do congratulate you on that. I had a shortened title which said Healthy Lungs, because again, that's where my focus, and it was nice to read my history, but there are two other aspects of my history which are important. One, I have 3 teenagers, so not alone in this, and it is great that we're focusing on adolescents today. The other issue is my undergraduate degree was in chemistry, and chemistry plays a big part in this. So Juul is simply one brand, but it is the brand of choice for today's adolescents. This is not just timely for Cape Cod. It's not timely for Barnstable or any other town on the Cape. It's not just timely for Massachusetts. It's timely for the United States. And this is actually a worldwide phenomenon that we are seeing just in the last few years. The FDA has declared this an epidemic of vaping, if you will. And when you have an epidemic, when you have a new problem, it takes a bit before you can even understand it. And then there's certainly a lag time before you can do anything about it. And that's where we are with this. So 1 in 4, the best statistics I can come up with is 1 in 4 Massachusetts teens has vaped. A lot of surveys say much higher. The kids will say much higher. Obviously, when you're surveying kids, they may underreport or overreport, but that is an issue, because when the kids are saying much higher, there's also an element of social pressure to it. But the best information I have is 1 in 4 high schoolers in Massachusetts has vaped. I have met 6th graders, unfortunately. I was talking to Katie, Dr. Rudman, before this, and certainly she sees this in her office, unfortunately, all the time. So just as a background, I just want to go through the way I look at the lungs. I've been looking as a surgeon at lungs since 1991 when I got done with my fellowship. The majority of what I do is cancer operations, but in thoracic we deal with everything up here. But the majority of my day is looking at lungs. So I've seen diseased lungs. I don't really want to cover cancer risks from this right now. I think for teens, that's 20 years in the future, and they just cannot visualize that. I am also not trying to scare any parents or grandparents here. I would feel bad if that's what you walked away with. That's not the case. I just want to give you talking points. It's scary enough being a parent. But let's talk about the healthy aspect of things. So I see the lungs as a tree. It's just upside down. Air exchange occurs in the leaves. But for a tree, carbon dioxide comes in and oxygen goes out. For the lungs, it's the opposite, right? We get rid of carbon dioxide. But there is a main trunk, the trachea, and then it splits into the right and left bronchi, and then out further into the bronchioles. And in the leaves of the tree, we call those the alveoli. This is another example of that tree. So really, air exchange occurs in the very outside in the leaves, but these smaller branches I'd like to focus on today, because we do see inflammatory changes from inhalation of some of the substances that are in the e-cigarettes. So in my career, I was pretty happy with things. This is 1950. This is 1980. This is when I got done with training. This is men, lung cancer rates. This is women. Two things. Women came later. We actually call this the Virginia Slims bump, right? There was a heavy pursuit of women. Why? Because men's smoking rates were dropping off. But why is this? Is this because I'm doing new cool surgery that we have immunotherapy and all that? No, that's because in the 70s, we began to put in place, the late 70s, the preventative kind of systemic warning labels, get cigarettes out, make it known that this is bad. So this was an effort by the government to say, stop smoking. And it worked. It worked. Women dragged later because they didn't start smoking until here. So it's a lead time of 20 years. When I grew up, I was taking care of the World War II vets who started smoking for very good reason. And those are the people that I saw in my fellowship and subsequently. So that was where lung cancer rates are, but this is the new, Juul is the new cool. And I think most of the kids who are Juuling don't even know who these people are, but it is the new cool. That's not a flash drive. And that's recognition of these electronic devices is really actually very hard. That's a Juul. It charges via that little part there. It looks like a flash drive. And many, many adults are confused by this. There's a variety of devices out there. They all have a basic principle, but recognizing what an e-cigarette is hard. Now, why am I picking on Juul? Well, Juul owns now 2/3 of this e-cigarette market, and 2/3 of Juuls are estimated to end up in the hands of adolescents. So it is the main player. The kids do not refer to it as vaping or e-cigarettes. They call it a Juul. So e-cigarettes have been out for about 10 years, and they still have legislative traction, if you will, because there were some early studies that suggested that perhaps for established smokers, this was one way to help established smokers wean. Now they will, the companies are still, that's where they get by on this. There was a promise. When it first came out, I said, oh, maybe this makes sense for my patients who are smoking, a small metered dose of nicotine on demand. But that's not what happened. This went boom for kids. Why? It's instant, it's electronic, it's easily concealed. So it meets all the teenage basic needs. And you know, this generation, and I'll go into that a little bit, grew up with the phone and that electronic thing. So there's a social, it seems that there's a social drive that, you know, when one kid has one, they're worth about $50, and they share them. So it's a, you know, it's like a status symbol thing, and they pass them around. They definitely don't regard it as smoking. Cigarette smoking rates have consistently dropped for kids nationwide. They think smoking is gross, but somehow this is okay. 20% of kids surveyed believe that there's no nicotine in them and it's just water vapor. So there's a fair push to say this isn't vaping, it's not water vapor, it's inhaling. You know, it's aerosolized stuff. So Dr. Gottlieb, who is the head of the FDA, who has 2 daughters in their 20s, has helped declare this an epidemic. So, you know, that says a lot. Now, he just left that post, and there is big business at play, and I'll go into that a little bit. There is a survey from the University of Michigan. It's been out for 44 years, called Monitoring the Future. And one of the things that they traditionally looked at was alcohol use among teenagers, cigarette smoking, et cetera. So they've been in place for a long time. It's a very powerful survey. Everybody here in Massachusetts heard of the Framingham study. This is sort of the Framingham for kids. This, I apologize, is not in your handout. This is a late edition. And they've been doing this for 44 years and following kids. But their estimate, based on their large survey population, is that between 2017 and 2018 in this country, we acquired 1.3 million teens who are now vaping. 1.3 million. Now, there's not that many teens, actually. I think it's 16 million. So that is a lot of kids putting stuff in their lungs. So as I said, it's a little bit of a social phenomenon. This really took off in 2 or 3 years in Massachusetts. We didn't see this in 2015. And if you remember the spinner, everybody was running around. You don't see the spinner anymore. I'd like to not see this. The problem is nicotine is in that. And nicotine is one of the most highly addictive substances. Rats who are taught to press a lever to get a dose of nicotine will press the lever and knowingly shock themselves to get another dose of nicotine. I've dealt with nicotine addiction my whole professional career. It is tough to quit. That's why I said maybe when it first came out, oh, e-cigarettes might be a different way to do it. But if you know a smoker who has tried to quit, it is tough. So a little bit of the mechanics here. All of these are basically devices. The central issue is that there's a battery and a heating coil that takes a syrup and forms a cloud. Whether it's Juul or any of these variety, and there's more out there. Blue, who was one of the earlier cigarettes, is now making a rectagonal one that looks a lot like a Juul. But all of them work on the same principle, and there's a couple problems. One, you're taking a syrup and making it into a vapor cloud. So how do you do that? You have to superheat it. You can't just do that. You have to add additives. You need some volatile chemicals to get it up into the cloud. It has to pass a heating coil, which has heavy metals, cadmium, gold, zinc. This is what a Juul pack in the store looks like, and they're in every convenience store. These are called pods. In the aftermarket, and the kids sell these to each other, these are about $5 each. Each one of these pods is an equivalent to a pack of cigarettes in terms of nicotine. But these are the flavors, and there's a long list of flavors. Mango, cherry, cotton candy, watermelon. Ask yourself, who are they appealing to with this? Now, menthol has also traditionally been a flavor. Menthol suppresses a cough, but established smokers really don't want that. The age statistics for menthol alone is a much younger population. So why, if you're an established smoker, you've been 2 packs a day for the last 40 years, why do you need this? You don't. So what are we doing if we're taking these flavors and putting them out there in the population? We're helping established smokers? No. We're recruiting new smokers. So here's another look. Again, it's out of focus, but that's the charging pod. That's the Juul. This is about $40 in a convenience store. These are $19 for a 4-pack. I'm going to shift gears for a second because I think if we're going to understand this as a epidemic, you have to understand who is this generation. And I'm obviously interested in this because I do have 3 kids. The last generation that we're all exposed to is millennials, and millennials got a bad rap in terms of, they're lazy or they're not interested in working. They're actually a very interesting generation, but this is a different generation. This is Generation Z, the iGen, if you will. Their number one stressor when you survey them is school shootings, mass shootings. they're going to school. They do active shooter drills in school. It has not escaped the news cycle at any point in the last several years. They grew up in the war on terror. They may not have understood what 9/11 was, but they certainly know that going through the airport, there's a lot of active stuff. And they're under a lot of social media pressures, peer pressures. Everything's instant. All these kids will have an Instagram of them smoking a Juul. It's a social thing, and also, what is truth for them? Truth is what's online. So they've been told truth is not the truth. Dr. Mann's speaking a little bit later, and we'll speak more on this, but this generation reports a very high level of mental stress. Some people say, well, maybe that's good because we're reporting it, but traditionally, generations have been in the 20% zone. This generation, 37% of kids report severe mental stress. So all is not doom and gloom. This generation also appears to be very hardworking, and they are very, very socially caring about their friends. They do get information online, but not all of it's bad. My kid built a computer this summer. He didn't touch a piece of paper. He built the thing from scratch with cooling fans and stuff, hard drives, I don't know what. He did it all based on YouTube. So they have resources and they know how to use them. They definitely see smoking as gross. So it's important to begin to understand that generation, to understand why they're affected by this. But this is the signal that we send to them as well. This is Tiger Woods winning the Open or something, and everybody there, I guess, is in the moment. They don't seem like they're in the moment. Excuse me. But so we're sending them signals as well. So getting back to my chemistry aspect of this, I have not, in trying to understand this, I really feel like this is an obligation on my part. I take care of lung cancer patients, but I can spend 4 hours on one patient who's already has an established cancer, or I can spend an hour here and maybe get a few kids less. But malignancy is very far forward for teenagers, I think, to consider. That's 20 years in the future. But the chemistry aspect of this is very scary to me because I have seen a lot of lung disease based on other stuff. So nicotine is the primary addictive substance in this, and we could go on about that, but nicotine has a lot of side effects. A couple of the school nurses I've talked to see kids coming in, palpitations, nausea, vomiting, headaches, but it is highly addictive. And there are suggestions that a nicotine addiction leads to other pathways. The other additives, however, that have to be in these e-cigarettes include polypropylene glycol, diacetyls, heavy metals, and we are experimenting with a generation on this. These are some of the additives in the different flavorings, etc. And I'm going to focus on diacetyl for a second because this is the one I really want to do. The one thing I want to do today is give talking points to y'all for kids. I hadn't heard much about popcorn lung, and I'm supposed to know what's going on with lungs, but every kid knows about popcorn lung. My medical term for popcorn lung is bronchiolitis obliterans, which is, of course, a big fancy medical term, but break it down. Bronchiolitis, bronchioles, are the small airway tubes that I showed you earlier in the outer periphery of the lung. Bronchiolitis is inflammation, right? Tonsillitis, appendicitis, diverticulitis, itis. So inflammation in the smaller tubes in the lung. Obliterans actually speaks for itself, right? Obliterates. So what we have seen is inflammation in the smaller airways that then blocks them up and prevents good air exchange. And this is a CAT scan taken from underneath. So the right lung is actually on the patient's left. The middle is the heart. But you see those cloudy areas in some parts? That is the alveoli are no longer able to exchange air well. That's a severe case, but bronchiolitis obliterans definitely seems to be linked to this. Now, kids have pretty good pulmonary reserve. So if you damage 1%, 2%, and you can't run, 20 miles as a teenager, you can run 18, or will you notice it? It's probably an incremental set of damage. That is a more severe case. There are hypersensitivity reactions that, young kids have ended up on the ventilator, et cetera. Again, I'm not trying to scare. I'm trying to educate that this seems to be real disease that will set up over time. The studies in rats and animals, that's how we usually do things in medicine, are very suggestive early of an ongoing inflammatory damage to the lungs from these. But each e-cigarette has different levels of additives and different. So if we're going to do good science, you got to take each one individually, and then you got to wait 20 years to see what happens. And I just don't want to do it. I know it's not good. This is the trend of cigarette use in. I hate to keep jumping down. Sooner or later, I'll blow a knee or something. But this is cigarette intake among high school students in Florida. Why Florida? It's a nationwide issue, but this happens to be a very representative graph. Traditional cigarettes were going down, but this is what I'm talking about now. That's e-cigarettes. So if you're a tobacco company, you're going, hold on. So one of the other talking points I'd like you to walk away with is that I do think that the social aspect of this, that these kids care about each other, and I think appealing to them to not have their friends get hurt is big. But the other part is they need to understand that this is not little business. Juul, Marlboro Cigarettes is owned by Philip Morris. Philip Morris is owned by Altria. Altria just bought a $15 billion stake in Juul. They also bought $2 billion worth of a cannabis company up in Canada. But, I think that most of the kids think that this is a couple of hipsters sitting around assembling these things in a warehouse somewhere, and it's cool. I do want to talk about how you get this, right? Because most people say, well, kids can't buy this. Well, kids have always gotten cigarettes and beer and everything else. But online sales were very big. You just need to check a box. I'm 18, I'm 21. You need an Amazon gift card, and you need a delivery address if the parents are working. Pretty easy. There is a definite aftermarket. The kids are buying them for other kids, maybe kids who don't even smoke. I got to applaud their entrepreneurial thing. Older parent, and I've met, parents are buying this because they don't see it as potentially that harmful. But there is, the bottom line is kids can get this. It's not hard at all. But this is the traditional cost. And again, a pod for Juul is a pack of nicotine. The next thing I'm going to show you is a video from South Park. It's a little crude and a little rude. It's on TV. The kids like to watch it, but it does speak to the aftermarket products that the kids buy in school. Okay, so it's a little violent and a little crude. I apologize, but the kids watch this stuff at least, and they get it. And again, I was talking to Dr. Rudman before. I didn't stress earlier. This is not one group of kids. This is every kid in the school system. Athletes, good students, bad students, male, female. This is a very social phenomenon. In fact, a fair number of the athletic kids don't mind this because they don't see harm in it. Again, smoking is gross. This is not smoking to them. The statistics are that nationwide, e-cigarettes will make more money in 2021 than traditional tobacco products. So the lines are crossing for big tobacco. This is in your hand. It kind of covers the economy of this. But again, Philip Morris just bought $13 billion worth of Juul. I put this in there mostly for kids because, again, it's not hipsters. These people are doing very well. Juul was rated by the FDA, their offices, because of their marketing practices, and they voluntarily have changed their marketing practices. You may see more TV ads now towards this. There's also an aspect of e-cigarettes that slides under the regulatory part of other tobacco products, but you will see ads and radio ads now targeting a more adult audience, but it's really, they've established their market. This is e-cigarette sales from 2008 worldwide to 2017. That says 10,000, but you need to put a million behind that. So this is $10 billion worth of cigarette sales. And this is a problem in Europe as well. Again, the aspect of this is that this is very easy to conceal, very easy to smoke. You pull it out, you can puff it. The kids will blow it into their sweater. Restaurants will say no smoking or vaping because there's this mindset that it's different. But the vapor disappears fairly quickly. Some of them have a scent to them, but it's very hard for most adults to recognize this. Some of the school systems, they're taxed heavily. The teachers can't keep up with this stuff. That's not their job. I've heard them, well, get more law enforcement. Law enforcement's busy. This is a difficult problem. They have sensors. I think if you try and beat a kid with technology, that's a losing proposition. It is very easy. I could literally turn here. Apparently, if you hold your breath long enough, the aerosolization disappears enough, and you can exhale maybe with a sweet scent. And then it's gone. And, that's my flash drive. So this is our former Republican Speaker of the House. He's now lobbying for the American Cannabis Summit. I don't want to cross too much over from e-cigarettes to cannabis products because that's a whole nother hour's worth of discussion. But I will say that these companies are active in both, okay? And the delivery system is the same. So you can retrofit the Juul pods with THC syrups, etc. And I would say if you're looking for one easy read, the writer who wrote this did a very good job in portraying the phenomenon itself. It's in the New Yorker magazine. That's in your handouts. But you can simply Google The Promise of Vaping and the Rise of Juul. And the last slide, just talking points on this. Again, I have not focused on the cancer risk. I think it's important, if you have an opportunity to talk to a kid, to acknowledge what's going on, have them talk about it, have them explain it to you. The kids seem to be very forthcoming about what everybody else is doing, and I have a lot of parents say, well, everybody else is doing it except my kid's good, but I don't know where the statistics are. But I do think that for this generation, probably the biggest appeal is because this is passed around, because it's a social phenomenon, the thing that you say, don't let your friends get hurt by this. Don't be played by big tobacco. Understand that they do contain nicotine, that nicotine is highly addictive. And that's basically all I got to say on that.